And I came home the next day after meeting him. I met him in Chicago at a conference, and nothing happened. I wasn't disloyal, but I came home the next day and I told my husband that we were done.
What up?
What up?
I'm Bianca.
And I'm Adrian.
And we're two independent women living in New York City going through a lot of stuff.
And that's why we're here, to share our stories and our experiences. And hopefully you'll learn with us.
Or you can just laugh with us.
In this episode of Women in the Wild,
what are we talking about?
We have a guest today, our very, very first guest, Karen Millen. We're so lucky to have her. She's from the Healing Podcast, and Bianca can tell us more about her.
So I met Karen through her Healing Podcast as a video person, and she has a lot to say about love and self-love and getting to know yourself and therapy. And that is actually what her podcast is about, is for you to learn and get inspired to heal in any way, shape, or form. And we're so excited to have her because she has an amazing story about relationships and self-love and finding yourself. And we thought she'd be a perfect guest to have our audience know her story and also learn from her experience, not just ours.
Thank you for having me, and congratulations on your podcast. I think it's great what you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Yeah, so one of the reasons why we are actually inviting Karen here is because Bianca and Karen know each other. But what was one of the stories that drew you guys together when you were working on Karen's podcast?
So Karen has a story about growing and learning who you are and learning what works for you. And I think Adrian and I both resonate a lot with that, because as two young women in New York City, I'm single, Adrian's dating right now, but our audience knows we have a ton of stories about dating and like things working out and then not working out, and learning through each experience and having to grow and like accept things as we keep meeting new people. And I think Karen is a perfect example of someone who definitely went through that in a more serious level, because Karen is married and it is her second marriage now. And she has a beautiful story that is also non-conventional when you think of people who go through a divorce. And I think it's beautiful because it's all positive. Like, even the divorce was a great one, and she has a great relationship with her first husband. And I think she just has a lot to say and a lot to teach people. I would love to have the relationship she has with her ex-husband with any partner that I would ever have in my life. She basically has a picture perfect path or journey through that. And I think it is possible to like break up with people in a loving way, in a caring way, that you can still keep a connection, and that you can still, even after meeting someone else, be friendly and be loving to each other. Karen has a lot more to say about than I have, but that's basically her story and what I loved about it. And I think having her over today to tell it herself for our audience to hear is a great way to connect.
Well, thank you. I was very grateful to meet you. Bianca was doing my very first podcast recording, was actually a test to see how comfortable I was on camera and sharing my story. And I wrote a book called An Amazing Divorce. And the first question was asked, okay, tell me about your book. And as I started telling my story, Bianca was in awe and smiling and so engaged, and I kind of needed that fuel to keep going and keep sharing more, because her eyes were about to pop out of her face every time I was talking. So it was the right, perfect, serendipitous moment to meet. And thank you for your support and your energy that day. So I was in college. I had dated someone for about almost 2 years, and it was a very passionate and physical relationship full of love. And this was, um, I had never felt that alive and love. I could walk on the moon. And that relationship ended, which was really bizarre because I went from being totally walking in the moon in love to having woken up one morning and not feeling anything for this person. And it was very scary because I could have married him the day before. Um, and he noticed right away. He's like, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And then he spent about 3 months after that trying to get me back and take me to the opera and dine me and wine me, and it was gone. And so um, after that, it was a really hard breakup because I was very enamored with how amazing that relationship was and how happy I felt and how great it was. But I had a really serious notion that love doesn't pay the bills, or love doesn't last, or love is in Hollywood, and that feeling of loveness that you just want to jump someone and just can't get your hands off them, and you're just this chemistry dies. So uh, after that kind of learning, I developed the notion that serious relationships should be about having everything in common and more pragmatic and more rational and having a list of things that matter to you, because my ex and I, it was all love and passion and nothing in common. I wanted to be a professional woman and I was entering business school because I was very ambitious. He wanted a housewife. I was very vocal and opinionated. He didn't like my opinions. I was a feminist. He wasn't. And so because we had so much, and I actually learned that by reading a few books on relationships, a good 8 months after the breakup, that I realized, like, oh my God, I fell out of love because we had nothing in common. I didn't have a voice. He didn't like my friends. I started going out with him and his friends, and I sort of forgot about my friends. And I was, I think, 21
I have a
at
very
the time. Yes. And yes, I broke up from that relationship and I had neglected all of my friendships. And it was one of the main lessons I learned in life was like, boys come and boys go, even husbands come and husbands go, but your friends are your friends and your family are your family. And those, the good ones, stay forever, and do not neglect those. So I learned that lesson. And the other erroneous lesson I learned was that you should be rational. So I kind of had a list of everything that my ex wasn't. And, I want someone who's professional, who wants me to have a professional career, who's going to support me professionally, who has similar values, who's a feminist, who's has, similar values, similar likes and wants. And I was in business school at the time. This was after the breakup. And I met my previous husband, who was doing his MBA, and we were in the same class and started flirting. It was sort of my type physically. And when I met him, he had everything on the list. Our very first conversation, we went on a date that lasted 4 hours, and he wanted a wife that worked. He was very impressed with my professional achievements at the time. It was like everything that the other person didn't have. I wanted dogs. He wanted dogs. We were both from similar religious backgrounds. We wanted the same thing. He wanted a career woman. I told him I didn't know if I wanted children, and if I wanted children, I was going to go back to work immediately, and sort of very ambitious. I was the only female in my class who had an investment banking job after business school, and he was really impressed with that, and that's what he wanted. And I think that for both of us, our relationship was sort of a rational, she's got everything on the list and he's got everything on the list. And I got home that day after our first date and I told my parents, I know who I'm going to marry. And I was really excited. And
Wow.
he was cute. He was charming. He had three masters, not one. Highly educated.
How can you have three masters?
He spoke greatly about his parents. He had a good relationship with his father. Like everything on the list, you've got it. So we started our relationship, and very soon after, I realized that we didn't have a lot in common. Maybe 2 months into the dating relationship, we actually left college and we had a summer internship job in Toronto. I was in Canada at the time, and we had nothing in common. I like to sleep in. He wake up at 5 a.m. He liked to walk around all day. I'd rather stay home and read. I'm an adventurous eater. I want to go to very ethnic restaurants and try very different foods. He did not eat anything. Um, and we started to fight and struggle. And after 3 months of dating, we had to buy the book Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus and like relationship books, because rationally we're meant to be, like we're great for each other, but we would not stop fighting. And I think that things got better once I had a job that I really liked, and he had a job that he liked, and we were working like 6 to 8, and we got home, and double income, no kids, and then he asked me to marry him, and we had the opportunity to work together. And I was like, yeah, we work really well together, and if I can see him all day and night and not be annoyed, this is it. So we both got married. We had talked about the fact that we weren't feeling madly in love for each other, that we did not have that feeling of like, oh my God, I love you. We did not have that chemistry where we would like make out for hours, none of that. It was all very rational. And he said, well, that's Hollywood love. That doesn't last. And I'm like, oh, okay, big mistake. We need it all. We need compatibility and we need love, because at the end of the day, that's what really gets you to stick together and gets you through the hard times. So we got married, had a great wedding, and then we were together for about 5 to 7 years. 5 married, 7 in total without having kids. And life was good because I worked full time, he worked full time, and we were busy. And on weekends, we had that lifestyle of brunches and friends and keep yourself busy. But deep down, I always felt sad that I didn't have that love part, because I am a loving, really romantic.
Aww.
And I remember very well watching romantic movies and hearing the love scenes. And I'm like, oh, I'm so sad I don't have that.
Aww.
I did do therapy for a while. And the therapist, I think it was very helpful in kind of understanding things and trying to realize why you're having silly fights. But it was nothing very substantial. It was like, well, just stare at him and focus on the positives. And then we had kids. We had our first child, and that was fantastic. It was actually the first time in our entire marriage that we were both really happy about having this child. But having a child really changed me. I went from I'm not having kids to I'm going to work right after I have kids to like, oh my God, who is this defenseless, hopeless child who needs me? I didn't feel that I could leave her with not knowing who was going to take care of her, and if she was going to be held if she cried, if she, I wanted to breastfeed her, and all of this childhood trauma and neglect and who was I kind of came to the surface. So I changed dramatically from the very ambitious person that he married that was going to go back to work and go earn her double-digit income and be a strong provider to like, oh my God, we have enough. I don't need any more than we have. I want to take care of this baby. And at least until I find someone that I totally trust that could take care of her. So that brought a lot of strife in the marriage, because what kept us together was having that common goals and common ambitions. And when he thought that, okay, I didn't really want to marry a housewife. If I wanted to marry a housewife, I would have had a broader selection because I wasn't a very good housewife. I realized that I grew up in Latin America with a lot of help, and being home, when you work and all you have to do is a few dishes and you cook, I clean. But when you have a baby, the amount of work was horrific. It was nonstop. And for me to have time to breastfeed her and take her to music and me and Gymboree and all these activities to keep her intellectually stimulated and cared for, and cook, clean, launder, it was too much for me. So our marriage started to suffer significantly because I wasn't going to be bringing the income. And, and it's not just about the money. Like, if you want to be with someone super professional, stimulating. The stuff you talk about after work is really great. It's not very sexy to come home and talk about diapers and poo and vomit and, dishes, right? So that was really hard. And then I had a second child. We both wanted a second child, and shit hit the roof, because when you have a child, it's a lot of work. But when you have two, it is incomprehensible the amount of exhaustion and work. And
Can't even imagine.
It's not double, it's tripled. So we started fighting a lot. You go from double income and no kids to one income and two kids. So your spending habits, your lifestyle, everything changes. So we started fighting a lot. It was the first time after the second one was born that I started thinking about divorce, because life is short and I was miserable. And we went to couples therapy. The couples therapy was horrible. She wasn't very helpful. In the podcast, I focus on interviewing really good couples therapists with really proven methods to help couples thrive and get over their issues. But this one was like, hey, I don't recommend divorce. Divorce is horrible. It divides everything. It's painful. You should have open marriages. And I'm like, well, no judgment. I
can't believe she said that.
Oh yeah. And I'm like, if I was here talking about a lack of sexual disconnect, but no, like, she was terrible. And then I had a really interesting story, because I was unhappily married and I was working, and I think a lot of my individual therapy that I did through that really unhappy period really helped me to understand who I was, what I needed in a marriage, what I was not getting, what was important to me, what I wanted. And even though I had not made the decision, well, I'm going to separate tomorrow, which I did previous to that, we did talk about divorce. We talked about breaking up. We actually planned it, and then both decided to give it another chance and keep working because the kids were little and we would regret it after. And during that process, through work, I met a gentleman who, just talking to him like I talk to any customer I have, and who are you and what are you about and what drives you, I realized that he was my soulmate. After 4 hours of talking to him, I realized that he had a lot in common, that I had everything that I didn't have with the other one: love languages, preferences, values, ways of living. And I came home the next day after meeting him. I met him in Chicago at a conference, and nothing happened. I wasn't disloyal, but I came home the next day and I told my husband that we were done. I was crystally honest, and I said, you're not going to believe this. I had never planned this. I never looked for anyone. And he was my soulmate. I explained why he was my soulmate. I told him everything, and I told him we were done. It was heartbreaking. It was definitely the hardest time of my life because I cared about him. We were married for 17 years. That's a long time. Um, when
Yeah.
you are with someone for that long and have children, they are your family. And so I had the clarity from the beginning that even though it was the end of my marriage, it was not going to be the end of our relationship. It was not going to be the end of our friendship. That this is the person who's the father of my kids, who I'm going to share graduations with, and we're going to be grandparents with. So I had that sort of clarity that we were going to do everything we could to make this work. Um, I also had the clarity that I didn't have a very good relationship with my dad, that he wasn't very present in my life, and how that screwed me over and why I married the wrong person, because I mimicked the relationship I had with my father, that I wanted to make sure that my kids had a good relationship with their father. So from day one, from our initial breakup, I told them, I want you to know that you're not going to lose your children. You are going to be present in their life. We are going to do everything we can to share them equally. Um, and another clarity I had was that when I was 28, my parents separated for a year or two, and they were able to stay together and not stay together. They were living in separate homes, but they spent time together when they came to see me. And I realized how great that was, and I wanted that for my girls. So from the second we separated, we had dinners every Wednesday. We used that time as a family to tell daddy about our week and what we were going through, to make cooking competitions, to make it a lot of fun. And so the girls had a really good transition. They went back and forth from houses. We lived in the same neighborhood. Um, and we were friends to the point that when my ex moved out and started dating, I was his friend and giving him advice on dates. And after my relationship with my ex was solidified and my kids were fine, I started actively dating my current husband, the person I left him for. It helped that he was in New York and I was in Toronto, so I was able to focus on the family. And then through all the healing I have had through my previous marriage and therapy, I was able to achieve an amazing marriage. I'm now married for 7 years to this fellow, and we are still on honeymoon. We don't fight. We're very romantic with each other. We're full of passion. We had a child together. We have a 6-year-old in common, and we step parent 2 of his kids and 2 of mine. And so life is good. That's my story. Very long story.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing it. We don't really get to know the person necessarily before deciding to be with them. And that was like I think that's the first lesson I ever learned in like dating seriously. It's like sometimes I am very impulsive and I just jump into a relationship because I just think it's going to work. But how can you know it's going to work if you don't know the person really? Like you need to
I
give
think
yourself a few months at least.
now that you say that, it made me think that we are so predisposed as a culture and with Hollywood to want the hot guy, to want the good looking girl, and that is very attractive at first, but looks really fade very quickly. And I think that with my ex boyfriend, he was very hot. He was tall, dark, and handsome, blue eyes, big head of hair, curly hair. Like he was out of a GQ magazine. And that's when I noticed him. And that was a lot of the chemistry. But looks fade. I have, even at my age, 45 years old, I have single friends. And all they care about is looks. And they're still single because looks fade. If one of my biggest advice is that you have to find someone who adores you and knows you and respects you and has your love languages and gets you, because believe it or not, that stuff makes you fall in love hard.
Yeah.
That stuff is what's behind the really good sex and the really good connections, is feeling that connection and that love, and that he gets you, he listens to you, you're seen, you're cared for. And if he's black or white or pink or blue or fat or skinny, or I mean, you do have to have some level of attraction, but I would not judge a book by its cover. That's
And can I just add something to that too? I guess also for like people, Bianca's in my age, like even before this, before I settle down and have a boyfriend, one of the things I noticed is that like a lot of how we're dating now is judging a book by its cover, because a lot of the dating apps are very quick, self-gratifying.
all
I
pictures.
know all pictures that, you know, there's even a term called catfishing. So I guess I really like that you say that looks will fade, and that's not the best way to really choose a partner. So yeah, that's a good reminder that it's, you know, looks
That's
will
huge,
fade.
because when you, I mean, that gets you the first attractment. And not to minimize it, I think
Of course.
sadly men are very visual, a bit more than we are. And I do think you need to look cute when you go out on a date, and, you know, try to do that. And
Make that effort.
Thank God for makeup and hair and outfits, right? Finding what's sexy and what's our, but as we, ownership of who we like, especially as women, to know that looks fade, and that if you don't have everything else, and the respect and the connection and the similarities, both value long term and short term, hobbies. One of the things that I wanted to say is knowing yourself and who you are is number one. Who are you? Not just at the emotional level, which is really important, but what do you like to do if you have disposable income? So whether it's $20 you're saving and spending, or 1,000 or 2,000, despite of your earning bracket, what do you like to do with that money? Do you like to go buy new shoes right away? Do you like to shop? Do you want to go eat it at a restaurant? Do you want to travel? Like, that is huge. Are you an inside person or an outside person? How do you like to spend your days? What time do you like to wake up? Do you enjoy staying home and having a good cup of coffee and a great meal and turning on the candles? Or do you have to wake up and be outside and have your coffee? And food, adventure. Are you adventurous? Are you don't like adventure? Do you like camping and hiking, or you don't? Like, that stuff we never ask or we never focus on. But knowing who you are at a very deep level, emotionally, and what you want in life, you know, when you look at the future, how do you see yourself? But especially all of the little things, because I only focused on the long-term vision in my first marriage. Do we both want to work? Are we both Christian or spiritual or not? Are we do we want children? Do we want dogs? But hey, we change. You change. Parenting, motherhood will change you in ways that you had never envisioned.
Oh my God, Adrian, get ready.
What are you talking about? No. I want dogs.
So it's important to have that notion. But if you're going to spend and live with someone and marry someone, I have to tell you that for 17 years, we were so different that we were very lonely. He left every morning, came back at 2 p.m. I was lonely every morning, eating a breakfast on my own, hanging out on my own. He was lonely, hanging out on his own. The way we spent money was drastically different. What he valued, and if we said, okay, we have $200 on our salary to spend, or $500, where he wanted to put it was very different to where I wanted to put it. What we enjoy doing with our free time. I enjoyed visiting people and hanging out with people. He did not like that at all. He wanted to go shopping. Nothing wrong with that. Different for a guy. But I didn't, you know, so it's important because life is hard without having, even having all the similarities. Life is hard. Parents get sick, you get sick, and there's financial problems, people lose their jobs. But when you have life that is hard and you don't have anything in common, you don't want to spend Saturday morning the same way, you don't want to spend the money the same way, you don't want to spend your vacations the same way. The way I vacation and the way my ex vacation was very different. So I lived 17 years of a life I didn't want to live. And if I complain about it, he'd say, well, it's not a bad life. What are you complaining about? But life is your life. It's your choices. And, we live once.
Yeah.
Even if you believe in reincarnation and you come back again, it's still your life. And when you're young and you have the choice to choose who you want to be with, be very selective. And
Yeah, I like that.
lists for me are amazing. Who am I? I'm this, I'm that. I like hiking. I like camping. I like pooing in a hole. Who are you? What turns you on? What gives you satisfaction in every detail? And who do you want? Captured every relationship you've had in the past, every single boyfriend you've had, even since you were 16. What did you like about Peter? What did you like about Joey? What did you like about Pietro? Whatever. I liked that he was hardworking, that he was ambitious, that he was a gentleman. Like, what did you like? What didn't you like? Because the more you know about what you want and the clearer that list is, when you meet him, you will grab onto him to save yourself, and you will not care if he's bald or white or pink or anything. You won't, because you will be like, that happened to me. I had that list. I knew what I wanted. I knew what I did not want. And when I heard those words, and when I heard his friends describe him that way, and I'm like, oh my God, where do I sign up? And I told them, I said, I cannot wait to sign up and jump on this train, because you know what you want.
Yeah. And I have a question, actually. I don't know if, but on that note,
you go first.
Yeah, just one small question. But you were mentioning that, like, since you already know yourself really well, that when you meet somebody that is super compatible for you in any aspect, you already can tell and are more willing to, like, invest in that person. But what does that transition period look like for when you're ending one relationship, especially one where you have kids and it's 17 years and all these things, like, especially because your topic is healing, like, how do you then function in that transition period? How do you keep a balance between, what your old relationship was, and then also giving time for this new person, and for that new love to kind of flourish?
Very good question. I personally did a lot of therapy. Once a week for sure. The minute I broke up, I wanted to invest in myself and really, really understand why I married the wrong person, or why I married him, why I stayed for 17 years.
That's a long time.
I lived without kissing and without doing the things I want to do. Who am I? And when you do therapy, you not only get to know yourself really well, but you also are self-analytical about what you didn't do in your other relationship and why you were not the right person for this other person. So my therapy was really good too. And I did something called EMDR that I have 5 episodes on the podcast about, because it's a very effective way of not just going there and talking and just talking, but it goes right into one specific issue. And it has a way to helping you heal that one specific issue. So it's very effective. And I also learned how I failed my ex-husband, and how I wasn't there for him, and how I didn't listen to him, and how I didn't love him the way that he needed to be loved. I was like, how sad that I knew that I wasn't in love with him. And I remember things like he would ask me to get cream at the grocery store, and I would forget. And then he would text me, can you please get cream for my coffee? And I still forgot. So what that therapy did to me too was a huge amount of empathy for myself and forgiveness. I was feeling very guilty for having left him for another man. Like, no one deserves that. No one does. And forgiveness is really important to yourself and to the other person. So I apologize constantly and all the time. And I would tell him that. I said, Anthony, you do not deserve that. I am so sorry. I never planned for this. I would have never wanted to do this. And also focus on, like, you deserve someone better. So I'm not the right person for you. how sad. I mean, when I was separated and without the kids, I was having coffee on my own at a Starbucks, and I'm like, this is fucking lonely. And my ex-husband was lonely for 17 years.
Mhm.
So having a lot of conversations, I would stay close to that person because that was 17 years or 3 years
Right.
or 1 year. That's a long time. And I mean, we can be codependent and do it for another year, but I was helping him seeing why I wasn't the right person for him. How
Mm-hmm.
he deserved to be with someone who wanted to be outside all day, who enjoys shopping. I mean, most women do, who want to live life and spend life the way he does, and how
Mm-hmm.
this made me miserable. So, a lot of empathy, a lot of care, a lot of apologizing, um, because we're not perfect. And if there's
Mm-hmm.
anything that we can apologize for, and I have to tell you that after someone apologizes a million times, you will be forgiven. And he forgave me right away. I mean, I can't even think. He was mad for about a week, but immediately I'm like, I am so sorry. I did not mean this. I was, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna be here for you. And if you need me, I'm here for you. So uh, and at the same time, I mean, I did have a period of time where I wasn't actively communicating with the new person.
Mm-hmm.
um, and then once I felt that my ex was way better and he started dating, I think that in breakups, when the other person starts dating, is really helpful. I mean, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people say don't date right after. I find it very helpful as long as you're honest with the new date. I just
Mm-hmm.
finished a relationship. I'm not interested in anything serious. But dating was very refreshing. I remember for me, after I had broken up with this guy, because I realized all the things that very quickly of why I fell out of love with him. All of a sudden, I started dating this guy that all of a sudden asked me, "Oh, do you have a little sister? Oh, can I meet her?" I'm like, "Oh,
Mm-hmm.
this guy for 2 years did not have a sister, did not want to come see my parents." But when you're in love, you're in this cloud that you miss everything. Or I dated someone from Egypt, and he was taking me to all this Moroccan food and Egyptian food. I'm like, "Oh my God, I miss this," because I dated Italian. It was just pasta, 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 pasta.
Mm-hmm.
So dating is very important to kind of get your. So my ex-husband, another thing that worked really nicely was that he started dating, and all of his dates were divorced women who left their husband for another man. And he came up to me out of the blue and said, "Karen, what happened to you? You are not going to believe how common it is. I've dated 5 women in the last month, and they never told their husband that. They never told anybody else.
Wow.
But a lot of women use a catalyst." And he said, "I think this guy was your catalyst." And I'm like, "He is. I think he's the one. But if he's not the one, he showed me that there's someone better out there for me."
Mm-hmm.
The catalyst. Oh, like
So
that.
dating, I think dating after a breakup, as long as we're not hurting other people's feelings,
Mm.
is very helpful to see what's out there and know. And again, I think as a young person looking, is making a list. Oh, we went on this date and this guy likes, I don't know, art. Oh, I if that's what you like, put it on your list, because it's been researched and documented that when you know what you want and you feel it and you write it down, something magical about writing down what you want, it just shows up. And I
Mm-hmm.
have to tell you, this husband of mine showed up, and I'm like, I pray and I'm grateful every day that he's protected, because he's truly amazing.
Oh,
Nice. That's so
I love
amazing.
that.
Bianca, what was your question?
I'm interested in the therapy side of this story because while Karen was telling us her story, she did mention a couple therapists, including ones that didn't work. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's so important to point out because sometimes people are like, okay, I'll go to therapy. And then they start going through therapy and they start seeing someone and talking to someone. But sometimes, finding the right therapist takes time. And sometimes you're not getting the right advice. And Karen, you mentioned at first you had a therapist that was kind of wishy-washy about like don't get a divorce, you said a therapist told you, and also there was another one that told you maybe open the relationship instead of like seeing what the real problem was. And then you mentioned you saw a couples therapist who also wasn't very helpful. So what was it about your therapist that was different, and how did you start working with them to really solve the problem?
So my last episode of the Healing Podcast is how to choose a therapist.
Oh,
Oh,
perfect.
perfect.
A lot of my audience is like, okay, sign me up. I want to find an EMDR therapist, but how do I go about it? Well, part of the Healing Podcast is to learn and inspire you to heal. And once you're ready, I'm building up a network of a lot of my guests that you can go find and book a session. But that's on the
Amazing.
side. Let me answer your question first. I can go on a bit about how to find the right person. But
And then we'll link you the rest of your podcast for this also, because that's the perfect
That's a really
way to
important
wrap it up.
Yeah.
right. So I think that when you're seeing someone already, when you found a therapist and you find that you're going there and it's just like going to talk to your best friend and you're not getting anything out of it, you're not getting any insights, because a lot of therapists should not be giving you advice unless they're a coach or unless they're more on the cognitive therapy behavior where they're giving you homework and they're giving you like, okay, Bianca, I want you to make a list of this maladaptive behaviors you want to change. But in psychotherapy, and when you're trying to really understand yourself and your triggers and your traumas, you need to come out of each session, or at least every other session, feeling like an aha moment, like, oh, wow, I didn't know. For example, for me, I had terrible therapists where I would just go there and he's like, blah, 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 blah. And today, and he looked at me and he, okay, session done. But with this,
and then you just wasted $300.
right. So one thing is that going to any therapy is helpful. So if any of your audience have never done any therapy, going to any type of therapy is helpful, whether their person is super experienced or not, whether it's the online apps, BetterHelp or eTalk or
Talkspace.
Because if you've never done therapy, to understand your logic and your triggers and what's behind your anxiety or your agitation, really important. The issue is that there are things that we can understand at a cognitive level. My mother was not there for me. My parents worked too much and neglected me. And you can understand that and you can own it and say, well, my dad hit me on a daily basis or whatever that trauma was. And you can own it, you can talk about it, or you can hide it and say, well, you drink, you exercise, we all do that. But it's very different from understanding it at an emotional level. And unless you feel that pain, unless you go back to that when you were 8 years old and your dad left, or the day you got bullied at school and didn't make it into the play, or the day you were shamed at your presentation, unless you're able to go back to that inner child and feel that pain and cry and feel it, is the only time that you can heal and let go.
You're basically self-parenting yourself.
Right. And so there are times, if you have experience and you have done a lot of therapy, whether effective or ineffective, that you can do self-healing that way. I can do it now after years of therapy. If there's times that I'm feeling really anxious or I'm really mad, I can journal and bring myself back to, okay, you ask yourself, when was the last time I felt this way?
I like that.
When was the first time I felt this way? So, for example, Adrian might show up late to your appointment, Bianca. So that pisses you off. And you're like, okay, when was the last time I got pissed off because someone was late? Oh, 2 months ago. And then when was the first time? That could bring you back to when you were 8 and your parents were consistently late picking you up from school and you were harassed and embarrassed. And then you feel like you're not worthy, that you were not prioritized. So you take one little thing, that Adrian was late because her Uber didn't show up. And you're like, how dare you? And you're disrespectful. Like when you overreact and when you have a trigger, That's the first sign that there is something traumatic that happened to you that you have to go back to. So what I talk about in the podcast is not, I don't focus about just regular therapy, which I find it very helpful if you've never done therapy, but it's like, okay, now you know that you had an issue, that you
Mm-hmm.
experienced neglect, that you experienced abuse, that you experienced mental health from a parent, or your parents were an alcoholic, whatever. We all have it. If you still feel triggered, and if you still feel that that's stopping you from being who you want to be, um, you need to heal. And so I talk about healing modalities like EMDR, hypnosis, RTT. Um, there's a new thing out there that's illegal but becoming legal called psychedelics. Ways that you can help you go back to that, feel the pain, and heal. And that's amazing. That, I mean, I've done that a lot. And you go into a therapy session feeling really hurt and upset about something, and you come out and it's no longer an issue. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, whoa. And it's one session, it's $225, and you're healed, versus going to a bunch of sessions. So when you feel, to answer your question, Bianca, that this person that you've talked about the same issue, and you're not feeling any change, or you're still anxious, it's time to get a different therapist. It's
Yeah.
time to try some of these new modalities that I'm talking about at the podcast, because that's what's going to take it to the next level. Um, yeah, so that's to answer the question.
Okay.
To find the right therapist, we have to call a bunch of people. What I'm trying to do with the network is provide you a list of 3, but you have to feel, just like when you're dating, you have to feel, do I feel safe? When you hang up the phone, do I feel special? Do I feel heard? Or was she just getting me through questions and quickly? Another thing is having things in common. Like if you're going there because of neglect or sexual abuse, or physical abuse, or addictions, or try to find out, is this your specialty? Like, what's their
Mm-hmm.
specialty? I personally also liked gender similarities. I always went with
Mm-hmm.
women because they know you. If you're gay, go with someone gay. If you're black, hire someone black. If you're, because you relate. They know,
Yeah, you relate
feel
more.
that connection. You don't have someone who has no idea what you're going through.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that I find really helpful. Um, and yeah, it depends. If you've never done therapy before, I recommend any type. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and if you feel that that's no longer enough, or you have the resources to go right into EMDR because you have trauma. So something I speak on the podcast is, very, very few of us had a perfect childhood. And there's the American Association of Disease and Control has published this list of things that are considered traumatic. And it's a list of 8. And if you've experienced any of those, and your number could be 1, or could be 8, or could be 3 or 2, that's traumatic, and that will leave you stuck.
Oh, I would love to see
Where
that link
you
and check it out.
can't get the job you want, you can't get the relationship you want, you can't stay in the relationship you want, you are a nutcase, you're anxious, you're overreacting, and no one wants to date someone who's overreacting and anxious all the time. And that is physical abuse, emotional abuse. So bullying, having a parent that told you you're not good enough, or yelling
Mm-hmm.
at you all the time. That's physical neglect. So being left alone a lot as a child to take care of your siblings, or being alone, um, or emotional neglect, which I suffered, having workaholic parents who were never there for me, never picked me up from school, never went to any of my games, left me alone when I was sick with nannies. But I was never felt like, you matter, you're important, let me play with you. I've never recall my parents playing with me, anything.
I've actually done EMDR therapy in New Jersey when I was 14, because that was a time that my stepdad and my mom were going through a divorce.
Oh,
And my mom also suffers from bipolar manic episodes. So that's why me and my brothers actually, I think I was between the 3 of us, because I'm the eldest of 3. I was the one who did EMDR therapy. And then my younger brothers did cognitive behavioral therapy so that they can continue with school, and all of those things.
oh
But
wow.
yeah, I since you're talking about it, it's actually really nice to hear that that's what you did too. That's really cool.
Yes. Did you find it effective?
I did find it effective, and I see a different therapist for that because right now I see one therapist constantly every week, and then I have two other like I have a psycho, um, a psychiatrist, and then also a psychologist.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool to like hear you talk about your experience with it, and that that's what you're mainly recommending. Because
You
yeah,
know what?
I personally really enjoyed it.
I love EMDR, and not just for the big trauma. So let's finish that list. So
Yeah, sure. Go
physical
ahead.
abuse, emotional abuse, because you think,
Mhm.
oh, well, my parents worked, they had jobs, they loved me, they paid the bills, they fed me. No, you're still traumatized. And when you
Mhm.
are neglected on a daily basis, that is complex trauma, because that
Mhm.
tells you every day you don't matter. And if you don't matter, you're going to meet someone who's going to make you feel that you don't matter. So I married a guy who had 3 masters, good looking, good father, respectful, never hit me, never cheated on me, loyal, and a good values man, which is why we're friends.
Someone you should
Did
say,
not
you
listen
should,
to me. I would
yeah.
say, Anthony, I don't want to go to Miami. Next day, oh, I bought tickets to Miami. Oh, I don't want to buy the art. He should, like, I spoke to the wall and I accepted it as dating because my parents never listened to me because I
Mm.
didn't matter. My opinion didn't matter. My likes didn't matter. And I married someone who showed me every day that I did not matter. So, and if someone could look at that. I'm like, well, you weren't sexually abused. You weren't hit and beat up. You weren't. I'm still traumatized and married, made things that made me cry on a daily basis. So that is trauma. And one of the goals is that we all have trauma. And then is losing a parent to death or
Mm-hmm.
incarceration. Divorce is traumatic. Um, Growing up with anyone in the household that had mental health issues or alcoholism or any type of addictions, um, or violence of any kind, seeing your parents. So that's the list of 8.
Okay.
If you have anything, could be one episode, like I have 2 or 8, EMDR is amazing. So even, and I recommend it too for non-traumatic events. So one of my issues when I met my husband, my current husband, we were separated because he couldn't get a job in Toronto. So he left New York to move to Canada for me. Then he couldn't get a job in my city. So he had to get a job 3 hours away in Canada. And after living with him for a year and being the happiest time in my life, I mean, I was 41, I had never felt loved in my life.
Oh,
How sad is that? And I used to tell my parents, I've never felt loved like this way from you, from my ex, from anybody. Like,
I'm so happy you found him.
oh my God, to feel loved and heard. The minute I say I want soft boiled eggs, a minute later, like anything, it was like, so then when he left, I couldn't stop crying.
Oh.
If just talking about it would make me cry. Saying goodbye at the airport would make me cry. And it wasn't like, it was like, and my children with my baby at the security, like, it was horrible. Like, I don't want to be crying in front of my kids. I don't want to be crying in front of the security, guy. So I went to do an EMDR. And I said, I do, and so from 1 to 10, how upset do you feel? 10. Uh, how do you feel? And they have a protocol that
Okay.
we talk about. And I came out of that session and I never cried again. I felt
Wow.
sad. I wasn't happy to say goodbye to him, but I was like, because I felt that it was like if you grow up in Africa and you're used to eating porridge every day and life sucks, but then you come to America and you're having this voluptuous buffet of every food under the sun, and then you got to go back to Africa to be alone. Because
Yeah.
when we left, I was going to be alone. I was like, oh my God, I was so sad that I would. But then with EMDR, what happens is that it takes you as, okay, you're now a 41-year-old Karen. Can you talk to that little girl who's neglected and tell her she's going to be okay? Tell her she's strong. She's working. She's a mother. And that reparenting of your older self I walked out of there feeling completely better and feeling like I'm healed. And it was so magical. That's why I'm doing the healing podcast.
I myself, I'm doing therapy, but it's like I guess the more typical kind. I am in one of those apps, like you said, I'm in Talkspace, and I find it really helpful to talk to someone every day. But I'm very interested in EMDR now, and I'm gonna look into that because I don't think I've really gone like to my past and like reparented myself. And I know there's stuff there to heal. So thank you for all
I think
this.
it's great that you're doing that, and I'm very grateful for Talkspace and to be
Yeah.
able to offer that to more people and make it more affordable. And it's really crucial.
Yes.
It's only when you feel that, okay, I've reached a point where I want to go further, or I still, that you're like, okay, it's time to try something new.
Mm-hmm.
But what you're doing is really valuable.
This entire conversation is super valuable.
Yes.
We might even have to ask you to come back.
Yeah, I did wanted to touch on a bunch of different questions, including the fact that men are from Mars and women are from Venus. And when you pick someone, they're going to come up, they're going to have one issue.
Yeah.
You got to pick what you can deal with.
Yes. Adrian was saying she's so excited for your book. Let's just promote that a little bit. When do you think it's coming out? Amazing Divorce.
An amazing divorce, what you can do for yourself, for each other, and for your children to achieve it. It is coming out in the next 3 months for sure. It's actually ready to come out. I'm just planning the launch. And yeah, I'm really excited about that.
Your fourth baby.
Yes. And I think the motivation is that after having achieved such an amazing divorce, why are we not doing this? And with divorce rate being still in the 50% and 70% for the second marriage, what really helped me, I'm super excited. Whether 10 people read it or 1,000 or 1,000,000, that would make me happy to change.
I think a lot of people need it.
Do it differently.
Yeah, the numbers don't lie. Like there's so many divorces and it just keeps increasing. And I'm pretty sure not everyone is doing it as smoothly as you did. So I'm very excited for it to come out so people can read it and hopefully change their perspective on divorce and approach it in a more healthy way, hopefully.
Right. A big part of the book is also how to choose the right person and finding love again. And I do have a session of what I recommend and what to look at, and the love languages is mentioned, because if you're going to put yourself through divorce and your children, is to have something better, is to find love, is to show the kids what a real marriage should look like, what love looks like, what disagreements look like, versus, a lot of people get divorced and they either stay single and miserable, or they jump into another maladaptive behavior, maladaptive relationship, and repeat it all over again, and leaves their children completely traumatized. It's not right. So
I love this ending because it leaves everyone like interested in possible part 2, where we would cover all of those things in more detail.
Awesome.
And thank you so much, Karen, for sharing your story with us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Karen.
Congratulations on your podcast.
Yes, and congratulations on yours. And we'll be linking all of Karen's podcast topics down below, since they're pretty relevant to all of our love series. So everything will be linked down in our description.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye. Bye, Karen.